The dust on Penelope's hands turned to mud when she mixed it with her tears. Standing on the porch of the ranch house her father had built with his own 2 hands before consumption took him 6 months back. She had known this day was coming for weeks, ever since the notice arrived with that cold, formal script informing her that if she could not produce the full sum of $800 by dawn on the 23rd of March, the property would be seized by First National Bank of Clifton Hill, Missouri. $800 might as well have been $8,000 for a 24-year-old woman running a cattle ranch alone in 1882. The drought had killed half her herd, and what remained she had sold at terrible prices just to keep food on the table and pay her 2 remaining ranch hands through the winter. Those hands, loyal as they were, had families of their own to feed and could not loan her money they did not possess. Penelope Grace pressed her forehead against the wooden post her father had carved with their family initial and watched the horizon where the sun would break in perhaps 2 hours. Her dark hair, usually pinned up neatly, hung loose around her shoulders because she had given up pretending everything would somehow work out. The banker, Silas Worthington, had made it abundantly clear he had buyers lined up for her land, railroad men who wanted the water rights and did not care about the history soaked into every board and nail of this place. "Miss Grace, you should come inside and rest." Mary, the housekeeper who had stayed on despite Penelope's inability to pay her properly, stood in the doorway with a shawl. "Wearing yourself down to nothing will not change what morning brings." "I cannot rest, Mary." "How can I rest knowing that in 2 hours, everything my father worked for, everything my mother loved before the fever took her, will belong to strangers?" Penelope turned, and her green eyes blazed with the kind of fury that comes from helplessness. "I offered Worthington every penny I could scrape together, $430, and he refused. He wants this land, and he is using the law to steal it." Mary wrapped the shawl around Penelope's shoulders anyway. "Your father would not want you to freeze out here in the March cold. Come inside. If you must lose the ranch, at least keep your health." But Penelope could not move from that porch. She stared out at the land her grandfather had claimed in 1851, the rolling Missouri hills that turned green as emeralds in spring, the creek that never ran dry even when other water sources failed, the barn her father had painted red because her mother said it reminded her of the poppies back in Ohio. Somewhere out there in the pre-dawn darkness, her remaining cattle were settling in for the last hours before sunrise, unaware their home would soon belong to someone else. The sound of hoofbeats made her heart drop into her stomach. Had Worthington come early, eager to claim his prize before the sun even rose? She gripped the porch rail, prepared to make him at least hear her curses before he took everything. But the rider who emerged from the shadows was not the portly banker with his slicked hair and expensive suits. This man sat tall in the saddle, his broad-shouldered frame silhouetted against the slowly lightening sky. He wore a weathered hat, a duster coat that had seen years of hard use, and as he drew closer, Penelope could make out a face that looked carved from the same rough stone as the Missouri bluffs, all hard angles and sun-weathered skin. He appeared to be perhaps 27 or 28, though the hardness in his dark eyes suggested he had lived more than his years. He stopped his horse at the base of the porch steps and removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting. "Miss Penelope Grace, who is asking?" Penelope kept her voice steady despite her exhaustion and confusion. "Name is William Quinn. I realize the hour is strange for a visit, but I heard in town yesterday that you might be facing some difficulty this morning." His voice was deep, roughened by years of shouting over wind and cattle, but there was something careful in how he chose his words, as though he understood the weight of this moment. Difficulty is a polite word for it, Mr. Quinn. The bank forecloses at dawn, and I have no way to stop it. She saw no point in pretending otherwise. By mid-morning, everyone in Clifton Hill would know her failure anyway. If you have come to make an early offer on the land, you will need to speak with Silas Worthington. It will be his property soon enough. William Quinn dismounted, moving with the easy grace of a man who had spent his entire life on horseback. He pulled a leather saddlebag from behind his saddle and climbed the porch steps without invitation. Up close, Penelope could see the weariness in his face, the dust coating his clothes as though he had ridden hard through the night. "I have not come to buy your land, Miss Grace. I have come to help you keep it." Penelope felt her heart stutter. "I do not understand." William opened the saddlebag and pulled out several thick bundles wrapped in oilcloth. $800. That is what you owe, correct? Penelope's legs nearly gave out beneath her. She reached for the porch post to steady herself, staring at the bundles as though they might be a mirage brought on by her sleepless night. "That cannot be real. How could you possibly have that much money, and why would you give it to me? It is real enough. I have been working as a trail boss for the last 6 years, running cattle from Texas to Kansas. I saved every penny I could because I had plans to buy land of my own." William set the bundles on the porch rail between them. "As for why I would give it to you, well, that requires a longer explanation than we have time for before your banker arrives. The sun will be up soon. Take the money, pay your debt, and then if you are willing, I will tell you the whole story." Penelope reached out with shaking hands to touch the oilcloth, half convinced this was some kind of cruel dream. "Mr. Quinn, I cannot simply take your life savings. You do not even know me. What if I cannot pay you back? What if this is all some sort of trick?" "It is not a trick. And I do know you, though you do not remember me." William's rough features softened slightly. 10 years ago, your father hired me for a summer when I was a kid of 18 with no family and no prospects. I had been drifting since my parents died of cholera, taking whatever work I could find, half wild and full of anger at the world. Your father taught me how to manage cattle properly, how to read and write better than the basics I had learned, and when I got into a fight in town with some men who called me a saddle tramp, he paid my fine and told me I had more potential than I was showing. Your mother fed me at your family table, and you were just a girl of 14, but I remember you helping your father with the books and talking about how you wanted to run this ranch someday. Penelope searched his face, trying to pull up memories from a decade past. She had been so young then, more concerned with her lessons and helping her mother in the garden than paying attention to the seasonal workers her father employed. But there was something familiar in his eyes now that he mentioned it, a ghost of the angry young man her father had tried so hard to help. "William Quinn. I remember my father speaking of you. He said you had gone north to work the cattle trails, and he hoped you would make something of yourself. He was right to hope. Working the trails taught me discipline and gave me purpose. I saved my money and learned the business, and I always intended to come back here someday to thank your father for what he did for me." William's jaw tightened. "When I arrived in town yesterday morning, I learned he had passed, and that you were about to lose everything. I cannot repay him now, but I can help his daughter keep the land he loved." Tears were streaming down Penelope's face, but she made no move to wipe them away. "Mr. Quinn, this is more than kindness. This is your entire future you are offering me. Then let it be our future." William met her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I will speak plainly because we do not have time for dancing around the truth. I need land to build the life I have been working toward. You need money to keep your land. Marry me, Miss Grace. Let me be your partner in running this ranch, and we can both have what we need." The words hit Penelope like a physical blow. "You cannot be serious. You do not know me, not really." "I do not know you. Marriage is not a business arrangement to be decided in minutes on a porch. In our situation, it has to be." William gestured toward the eastern horizon where the sky was turning from black to deep blue. "In less than an hour, Silas Worthington will arrive with a contract that will take this ranch from you forever. You can accept my offer and fight for your future, or you can cling to pride and lose everything. I am not asking you to love me, Miss Grace. I am asking you to trust me enough to let me help." Penelope turned away from him, her mind reeling. Everything in her wanted to reject this mad proposal, to rail against the desperation that would drive a man to offer marriage to a woman he had not seen in a decade. But the bundles of money sat on the rail between them, solid and real, and she could feel the truth of her situation pressing down on her shoulders like a physical weight. If she refused William Quinn, she would lose the ranch. If she accepted, she would be binding herself to a virtual stranger, gambling her entire future on a man she barely remembered. "If I agree to this, I need your word that you will be a true partner," she said finally, still facing away from him. "This ranch meant everything to my father, and it means everything to me. I will not marry a man who intends to push me aside and make all the decisions himself. You have my word. I want a partner, not a servant. Your father spoke often about how smart you were, how you had a head for the ranch business. I would be a fool not to value that." William moved to stand beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cold morning air. "I know this is not how anyone dreams of getting married, but I swear to you, Miss Grace, I will do right by you and this land." Penelope turned to look at him, studying his face in the growing light. He had the weathered look of a man who had lived hard but honest, and there was no deception in his eyes, only a fierce determination that matched her own. "Then yes, Mr. Quinn, I will marry you, and you should call me Penelope if we are to be husband and wife, Penelope." He tested her name as though it were something precious. "We need to move quickly. Is there a preacher in town who would perform a ceremony before the bank opens? Reverend Thomas lives above his church. If we ride now, we could wake him and be married within the hour." Penelope grabbed the money bundles, feeling the weight of them in her hands, solid proof this was all actually happening. "Mary, Mary, come quickly." The housekeeper appeared in the doorway, her eyes going wide when she saw the money and the strange man standing on the porch. "Miss Penelope, what is happening? Mr. Quinn has brought the money to pay the bank, and we are to be married immediately. I need you to serve as witness." Penelope pushed past Mary into the house, her exhaustion forgotten in the sudden rush of action. She ran to her room and pulled on her best dress, a green cotton that brought out her eyes. Her hands shook as she pinned up her hair, and she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror, pale and wild-eyed. She looked like a woman on the edge of madness or salvation, and she supposed that was accurate enough. When she returned to the porch, William had already saddled her mare alongside his own horse. He helped her mount with steady hands, then swung up onto his own saddle with easy grace. Mary scrambled onto the back of William's horse, clinging to his waist and muttering prayers under her breath as they rode hard toward Clifton Hill. The town was barely stirring when they arrived, just a few shopkeepers opening their doors and the blacksmith stoking his forge. They pulled up in front of the white clapboard church, and William pounded on the door until Reverend Thomas appeared in his nightshirt, his gray hair standing on end. "Mr. Quinn, Miss Grace, what is the meaning of this commotion?" The Reverend squinted at them in the dawn light, clearly bewildered. "We need you to marry us, Reverend, right now before the bank opens." Penelope dismounted without waiting for help, her urgency overriding all sense of propriety. "Please, there is no time to explain everything, but this is a matter of saving my family ranch." Reverend Thomas looked between them, his confusion shifting to understanding as he pieced together the situation. Everyone in Clifton Hill knew about the foreclosure, and clearly the Reverend was quick enough to realize what was happening. "Come inside, then. If this is what you both want, I will not stand in your way, though I wish you were marrying under happier circumstances." The ceremony was brief, conducted in the Reverend's simple church with Mary and the Reverend's wife as witnesses. Penelope stood beside William in the soft light filtering through the plain glass windows, and when the Reverend asked if she took this man as her husband, she said, "I do," in a voice that only shook slightly. William's voice was steady when he spoke his own vows, and when he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, a ring he produced from his vest pocket as though he had been carrying it for just this purpose, Penelope felt the surreal weight of what she had just done. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Thomas said, and Penelope's heart hammered as William leaned down to press his lips to hers, chaste and brief, the kiss of strangers bound by law and desperation. They rode back to the ranch as husband and wife, arriving just as the sun broke over the hills and turned the morning sky to fire. True to his word, Silas Worthington was already there, sitting in his buggy with his clerk beside him, both men looking satisfied as cats about to catch a mouse. Worthington was a man in his 50s, well-fed and prosperous, with the kind of face that always looked as though he smelled something unpleasant. "Miss Grace, I trust you are ready to sign the papers transferring ownership of this property to First National Bank." Worthington climbed down from his buggy, his clerk following with a leather case full of documents. "I want you to know this gives me no pleasure, but business is business." "That will not be necessary, Mr. Worthington." Penelope dismounted and stood with her shoulders back, chin raised. "I have your $800. The satisfaction drained from Worthington's face, replaced by disbelief and then anger. "That is impossible. You had no way to raise that kind of money." William stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Penelope in a protective stance that she might have objected to if she were not so focused on Worthington's reaction. "My wife has the money because I provided it. I am William Quinn, and as of an hour ago I am Penelope's husband and partner in this ranch. We have the full sum in cash, ready to satisfy the debt. Your wife—" Worthington's face was turning an alarming shade of red. "This is outrageous. You cannot simply marry someone to avoid foreclosure." "I can marry whomever I choose, for whatever reasons I choose, and the law recognizes our marriage as valid." Penelope produced the bundles of cash from her saddlebag and thrust them toward Worthington. "Count it if you do not believe me. $800, exactly what is owed." "The debt is paid, Mr. Worthington, and you have no claim to this land." Worthington looked as though he wanted to argue further, but his clerk, a nervous young man with spectacles, was already counting the money. "It is all here, sir. $800 in full." "Then I suppose we have no further business," Worthington said through gritted teeth. "I will send the satisfaction of debt papers by the end of the week." He snatched the money from his clerk and climbed back into his buggy with such force the vehicle rocked. "Good day, Mrs. Quinn." They watched the buggy disappear down the road, and only when it was gone did Penelope allow herself to sag against her mare. The exhaustion hit her all at once, combined with the dizzying unreality of everything that had just happened. She was married, to a man she barely knew. A man who had saved her ranch, but who was now legally her husband with all the rights and expectations that entailed. "You should rest," William said quietly. "You look like you are about to collapse." I feel like I am about to collapse, Penelope admitted. Mr. Quinn, William, I realize we are married now, but I think we need to establish some understandings about how this arrangement will work. Agreed, but first, rest. We can talk this evening when you are not dead on your feet. William took her arm gently and guided her toward the house. Mary was already inside, and between the two of them, they got Penelope upstairs to her room. William stopped at the doorway, not entering. I will sleep in the bunkhouse with your ranch hands until we figure out more permanent arrangements. Rest easy, Penelope. Your ranch is safe. Penelope collapsed onto her bed, still wearing her dress, and despite everything spinning through her mind, sleep claimed her within moments. When she woke, the sun was past noon and streaming through her window. She lay there for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, half convinced the morning had been some elaborate, exhausted dream. But the gold band on her finger was real, and when she went to the window, she could see William down in the yard with her two ranch hands, Frank and Tom, inspecting the barn roof that had been leaking all winter. She dressed in her regular work clothes and went downstairs, where Mary had soup waiting. "Your husband has been working since you went to sleep," Mary said, her tone carefully neutral. "He has Frank and Tom fixing the barn roof, and he walked the entire property line, checking fences. He came in for lunch and ate like a starving man, then went right back out again. He is not my husband in the real sense, Mary. This is a business arrangement." But even as Penelope said it, she was not sure who she was trying to convince. A business arrangement that involves a wedding, a ring, and a man who just gave you his entire life savings. Mary raised an eyebrow. "You could do worse than a man who works hard and keeps his word, Miss Penelope." Penelope ate her soup in silence, thinking about Mary's words. She could indeed do far worse. Most men would have taken advantage of her desperate situation to make demands or treat her as lesser. William had offered partnership, and then immediately set about proving his value without fanfare or expectation of gratitude. She found him by the creek, examining the water level and the condition of the banks. He had removed his coat and hat in the afternoon warmth, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms browned by the sun and corded with muscle. He looked like he belonged here, she realized, like the land had been waiting for him to return. "The creek is healthy," he said when he noticed her approach. "Even with the drought last summer, you have good water. That is worth more than gold in this country. My grandfather chose this spot specifically for the water." Penelope stood beside him, watching the clear water flow over smooth stones. "He always said a ranch could survive bad years if it had good water." He was right. William turned to face her fully. "You look better. Did you sleep?" "I did, thank you. And thank you for getting the men working on repairs. That roof has been a problem for months." Penelope twisted the ring on her finger, suddenly nervous. "William, we need to discuss expectations. We barely know each other, and yet we are bound by law now. I need to understand what you want from this arrangement." "What I want is simple enough. I want to build this ranch into something prosperous. I want to work hard and create a life worth living, and I want to get to know my wife if she is willing." William met her eyes steadily. "I am not expecting you to fall in love with me, Penelope. I realize I essentially blackmailed you into marriage by making my help conditional on it. But I hope that, over time, we can build something real between us. You did not blackmail me. You gave me a choice when I had none." Penelope appreciated his honesty, even as it made her heart race. "I am willing to get to know you. I think I owe you that much, at minimum. But I need you to understand that I have been running this ranch alone for months. I am not accustomed to answering to anyone or having my decisions questioned." "Then we will make decisions together. You know this land and these cattle better than I do. I would be a fool not to listen to your experience." William's expression softened. "I am not here to take over your life, Penelope. I am here to share it if you will let me." They stood there by the creek as the afternoon sun painted the Missouri hills gold, and Penelope felt something shift inside her chest. Maybe this strange arrangement could actually work. Maybe William Quinn was exactly what he appeared to be. A good man trying to repay a debt and build a life in the process. Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm. William moved into the main house but took the guest room down the hall from Penelope's, respecting her need for time and space. They worked side by side during the days, repairing fences, tending the cattle, planning for the coming season. William proved to be everything he had claimed. A hard worker with a keen understanding of ranch management and a willingness to listen to Penelope's ideas and experience. He also proved to be easy company. In the evenings after supper, they would sit on the porch and talk, sharing stories of their lives. William told her about the cattle trails, the dangers of river crossings and stampedes, the strange beauty of sleeping under stars so thick they looked like spilled salt. Penelope told him about her childhood on the ranch, her father's dreams for the land, and her own determination to honor his memory by making those dreams reality. "Your father used to talk about you constantly," William said one evening as they watched the sunset turn the sky purple and orange. "He was so proud of how smart you were, how dedicated. He said you had more business sense than most men twice your age. He taught me everything he knew. I think he always suspected his health was failing and wanted to make sure I could run things without him." Penelope's voice caught slightly. "I just wish I had more time with him." William reached over and took her hand, the gesture simple and comforting. "He would be proud of how you have fought to keep this place, and he would be grateful you let me help, even if I did go about it in an unconventional way." Penelope looked down at their joined hands, his rough and work hardened, hers becoming increasingly calloused from ranch work. The touch sent warmth through her, a feeling that was becoming increasingly common when William was near. "I am grateful too. I know I did not say it properly before, but thank you, William. You saved everything that matters to me. You matter too, you know, not just the ranch." William squeezed her hand gently. "I am beginning to realize that marrying you might be the best decision I ever made, even if I did propose in the most awkward way possible." Penelope felt heat rise in her cheeks. Over the past weeks, she had caught herself watching William more and more, noticing the way he moved with such confidence, the kindness in how he treated the horses, the sound of his laugh when Tom told jokes over dinner. She was developing feelings for her husband, real feelings that went far beyond gratitude or business partnership. "I am beginning to think the same thing," she admitted quietly. "You have been kinder and more respectful than I had any right to expect, and more than that, I enjoy your company. I find myself looking forward to our evening talks and missing you when you are working the far pastures." William turned toward her, his dark eyes searching her face. "Penelope, I have been trying to give you time and space to adjust to all of this. But I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown well beyond our initial arrangement. I am falling in love with you. I probably started falling in love with you the moment I saw you on that porch, refusing to give up even when everything seemed hopeless." Penelope's breath caught in her throat. "William, I think I am falling in love with you too. I did not expect this, did not plan for it, but it is happening whether I want it to or not." "Do you want it to?" William asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," Penelope whispered. "Yes, I do." William leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but she did not want to pull away. When his lips met hers, it was nothing like the chaste kiss at their wedding. This kiss was full of weeks of growing attraction and newly confessed feelings, and Penelope felt it all the way down to her toes. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with equal fervor, finally allowing herself to feel everything she had been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, William rested his forehead against hers. "I want this to be a real marriage, Penelope, in every way, but only when you are ready." "I am ready now," she said, surprising herself with her certainty. "I am your wife, William, and I want to be your wife in truth. Take me to bed." He stood and offered his hand, and she took it, letting him lead her inside and up the stairs. They passed the guest room where he had been sleeping and continued to her room, the one that would now be theirs. When he closed the door behind them, Penelope felt a flutter of nervousness, but it was overwhelmed by anticipation and desire. William kissed her again, his hands gentle as he began to unpin her hair, letting it fall in dark waves around her shoulders. "You are so beautiful," he murmured against her lips. "I have thought so since the first moment I saw you again, standing on that porch like a warrior queen defending her kingdom." Penelope laughed softly, her fingers working the buttons of his shirt. "I felt like a defeated soldier, not a queen. But you made me feel strong again." They undressed each other slowly in the lamplight, and when William laid her down on the bed, Penelope felt no fear, only rightness. He was careful with her, mindful that this was her first time, and when he finally joined their bodies together, Penelope gasped at the brief pain, and then the overwhelming sensation of completeness. They moved together in the ancient rhythm, and Penelope understood for the first time why poets wrote sonnets about love and passion. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Penelope's head on William's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. "That was everything I hoped it would be," she said softly. "It was better than anything I imagined," William replied, his hand stroking her hair. "You are everything I imagined and more, Penelope Quinn." She smiled at hearing her new name, finally feeling like it truly belonged to her. "William Quinn, you are turning out to be quite the romantic for a trail boss cowboy." "Only for you," he said, kissing the top of her head. "Only ever for you." The months that followed were the happiest of Penelope's life. She and William worked the ranch as true partners, making decisions together and building the herd back up from the drought losses. They hired 2 more hands for the spring cattle drive and successfully sold their beef at excellent prices in Kansas City. With the profits, they were able to add more breeding stock and make long-needed improvements to the property. But more than the ranch's success, it was the deepening of their love that made Penelope feel like she was finally living the life she was meant to live. William was everything she had never dared hope for in a husband. Strong but gentle, confident but willing to listen, passionate but respectful. They laughed together over breakfast and made love under the stars on warm summer nights. He learned her moods and preferences, bringing her wildflowers from the hills and sitting with her when she had nightmares about losing the ranch. She learned his silences and hurts, holding him when he woke from bad dreams about his parents' deaths, and celebrating with him as he built the life they had been denied. In the fall, Penelope realized she was pregnant. She told William one evening on their porch, their special place for important conversations, and he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to be parents," he said, setting her down gently as though she were suddenly made of glass. "Penelope, you have made me the happiest man in Missouri." "We are going to be parents," she repeated, letting the wonder of it sink in. "Our child will grow up on this land just as I did. They will know the legacy of their grandfather and the love of their parents." Their son was born in early spring of 1883, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him Peter Grace Quinn, honoring Penelope's father with the middle name. William cried when he held his son for the first time, and Penelope fell in love with him all over again, watching her rough cowboy husband become the gentlest of fathers. 2 years later, their daughter arrived, a red-faced screaming bundle they named Rose Mary Quinn. Peter was fascinated by his baby sister, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to singing lullabies. The ranch house that had felt so empty after Penelope's father died was now full of life and laughter and love. On their 5th anniversary, William and Penelope stood on their porch at dawn, watching the sun rise over the land that had brought them together. Peter, now 4 years old, was still asleep inside, and baby Rose was drowsing in her mother's arms. "You ever regret it?" Penelope asked. "Giving up all your savings and tying yourself to a desperate woman you barely knew?" William pulled her close with one arm, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. "Not for a single moment. You were never desperate, Penelope. You were brave and stubborn and unwilling to surrender. Those are the qualities I fell in love with, and they are the same qualities I see in our children. This ranch, this family, this life we have built together, it is everything I never knew I was searching for during all those years on the cattle trails. I love you, William Quinn. I loved you when I said I do in a rushed ceremony at dawn, and I love you more with every day that passes." Penelope leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. "You rode into my life in the darkest hour and brought the light with you. And you gave me a home and a purpose worth all the years of saving and searching." William kissed her temple. "We saved each other, Penelope. That is the truth of it." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, painting the Missouri hills with gold, Penelope thought about that desperate night 5 years ago when she had stood on this same porch, convinced she was about to lose everything. She had lost nothing and gained everything: a partner, a love, a family, and a future that stretched out bright and full of promise. The ranch thrived under their joint management. By their 10th anniversary, the Grace Quinn Ranch, as it had come to be known locally, was one of the most successful cattle operations in western Missouri. They had expanded their acreage, purchasing the neighboring property when old Mr. Henderson decided to retire, and their herd was known for producing quality beef that fetched premium prices. But more important than financial success was the family they had built. Peter, now 9, was already showing his father's talent with horses, and 7-year-old Rose had her mother's head for numbers and business. They had added a 3rd child to their family, a boy they named James William Quinn, who at 3 years old was equal parts mischief and charm. William had grown some gray at his temples, but Penelope thought it only made him more handsome. The hard edges that had been there when he first rode up to her porch had softened, worn away by years of love and security. He was still the hardest working man she knew, but now he made time to teach his sons to rope and ride, to read stories to his daughter, and to steal kisses from his wife when the children were not looking. Penelope had changed too. The desperate fear that had driven her during those dark months before William arrived had been replaced by confidence and joy. She had proven she could run a successful ranch, and more importantly, she had proven she could build a marriage based on partnership and trust. The love she shared with William was not the hasty arrangement born of desperation, but something they had chosen every day through hard work and commitment. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard, William took Penelope's hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. "Do you remember what you said to me that first morning, that you would not marry a man who intended to push you aside?" "I remember. I was so scared and angry and desperate that I probably would have fought you just on principle." Penelope smiled at the memory. "I am glad you fought. I am glad you demanded to be treated as an equal, because that is exactly what you are. This ranch, this life, it would be nothing without you." William raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are the heart of everything I hold dear, Penelope. You and our children are the reason every difficult year on those cattle trails was worth it. You are the reason I get up every morning grateful to be alive." Tears gathered in Penelope's eyes, the good kind that came from overwhelming happiness. "You are my heart too. When I stood on this porch 5 years ago, I thought my life was ending. I did not realize it was actually beginning. You brought me not just money or security, but love and partnership and a family I never thought I would have." "We brought that to each other," William corrected gently. "You had the courage to trust a stranger with your future. That took more bravery than anything I have ever done." Penelope watched Rose chase Peter around the yard while little James toddled after them, shrieking with laughter. This was what her father had wanted when he built this ranch. Not just land and cattle, but a legacy of love and family. She had almost lost it to a banker's greed and bad luck, but William had ridden in before sunrise and given her back her dream, then made it bigger and better than she ever imagined. "Come here, you three," William called to the children. "Before bedtime, I want to tell you a story." The children came running, even Peter, who was starting to think himself too old for stories. They climbed onto the porch, and William settled James on his lap while the older two sat at their parents' feet. "This is the story of how your mother and I met," William began, and Penelope smiled because she never tired of hearing him tell it. "A long time ago, before any of you were born, there was a brave woman who was about to lose everything she loved. And there was a cowboy who had been saving his money for years, waiting for the right time to use it. One night, that cowboy heard about the brave woman's trouble, and he decided that the right time had come. And the cowboy rode through the whole night to reach her before dawn." Rose interrupted, bouncing with excitement. She had heard this story many times but never grew tired of it. "That is right. The cowboy rode hard through the dark, and he reached the brave woman just before sunrise. He brought her the money she needed, but he also asked for something in return." William met Penelope's eyes over the children's heads, and the love there still made her heart race. "He asked her to marry him," Peter supplied proudly. "He did indeed. And even though they barely knew each other, the brave woman said yes, because she recognized that sometimes the best things in life come when we are brave enough to take a chance on something unexpected." William pulled Penelope close with his free arm. "And they got married just as the sun was rising, and they saved the ranch, and they built a life together full of hard work and love, and eventually 3 wonderful children who keep them very busy. And they lived happily ever after," James proclaimed, even though at 3 he did not fully understand the story yet. "Yes," Penelope said softly, looking at her husband and children, at the land stretching out before them in the gathering twilight. "They lived happily ever after." Years continued to pass in the rhythm of ranch life. Springs full of new calves and endless work. Summers of branding and long days under the Missouri sun. Autumns bringing cattle drives and market trips. Winters offering a slower pace and time for family. Peter grew into a fine young man, inheriting his father's skill with cattle and his mother's business sense. Rose became the ranch's unofficial bookkeeper, managing accounts with precision that would have made her grandfather proud. James proved to be the natural horseman of the family, able to gentle even the wildest Mustang with patience and understanding. When Peter turned 18, William and Penelope sat him down for a serious conversation about his future. "Son, this ranch will be yours and your siblings someday," William said. "But you are old enough now that you should think about what you want from life. If ranching is not your calling, your mother and I will support whatever path you choose." Peter looked shocked at the suggestion. "Leave the ranch? Why would I do that? This is my home, my family's legacy. I want to build on what you and Mother have created to make Grandfather Peter proud." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. "Your grandfather would be incredibly proud of you already. You have his love for this land and his strength of character. Then I will stay and work beside you both until the day comes when you are ready to hand over the reins." Peter's voice was firm with conviction. "This is where I belong." Rose and James expressed similar sentiments when they came of age. Though Rose also harbored dreams of studying business in Kansas City for a few years before returning to apply her knowledge to the ranch. William and Penelope encouraged her ambitions, knowing that the ranch would only benefit from her advanced education. As William and Penelope entered their 40s, they began to ease back slightly from the hardest physical labor, though neither could fully give up hands-on ranch work. They hired a foreman to manage the day-to-day operations, freeing them to focus on the business side and to enjoy the fruits of their decades of labor. On their 20th anniversary, William surprised Penelope with a trip to San Francisco, the first time either of them had traveled beyond Kansas City. They spent 2 glorious weeks exploring the city, eating in fine restaurants, walking along the ocean, and enjoying having no responsibilities beyond each other. It was a second honeymoon, though their first had been nothing more than the night after their hurried wedding. "I should have courted you properly," William said as they stood on a cliff watching the Pacific Ocean crash against the rocks below. "I should have brought you flowers and taken you to dances and given you time to fall in love with me before asking you to marry me." "You did all of those things," Penelope argued, leaning against him. "Just in a different order than most people. You courted me after we married, and it was perfect because I got to fall in love with my husband over years instead of months. Every day with you has been part of our courtship, William. Every sunrise we have watched from our porch, every problem we have solved together, every child we have raised, all of it has been you courting me and me courting you right back." William turned her in his arms to face him, and Penelope saw the same intensity in his eyes that had been there on that desperate dawn 20 years ago. "I love you more today than I did the day I rode onto your land with cash and a crazy proposal. I love you more than I did yesterday, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is the pattern of my life now, Penelope, loving you more with every moment that passes. And I love you the same way, you impossible romantic cowboy." Penelope pulled him down for a kiss, not caring that they were standing in public where anyone might see. "You saved me and I saved you, and together we built something beautiful." They returned to Missouri to find the ranch running smoothly under Peter's capable management. Their son had grown into a true leader, respected by the ranch hands and known throughout the county as a fair dealer and skilled cattleman. Rose had been accepted to a business school in Kansas City and would be leaving in the fall, though she promised to return every holiday. James, now 15, was training horses with a reputation that brought buyers from as far away as Illinois. As Penelope stood on her porch one evening, watching her adult children work the ranch that had almost been lost to a banker's foreclosure so many years ago, she felt a profound sense of completeness. Her father's dream had not died with him. Instead, it had grown and flourished beyond anything he could have imagined, nurtured by the love between a desperate woman and a cowboy who rode in before sunrise with cash and an outrageous proposal. William came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, and she leaned back against him, comfortable in their familiar embrace. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I am thinking about fate," Penelope said. about how one decision made in desperation changed everything. If you had arrived even an hour later, I would have lost this ranch. We never would have married, never would have built this life, never would have had our children. But I did arrive in time, and we did build this life. William rested his chin on top of her head. I do not believe in fate exactly, but I believe that sometimes the universe brings the right people together at exactly the right moment. You needed someone to fight for you, and I needed someone worth fighting for. That intersection was our beginning. It was the beginning of everything good in my life, Penelope agreed. I used to resent the circumstances that forced us together, the desperation that made me agree to marry a stranger. But now I am grateful for every bit of it, because it brought me you. They stood there as the sun set over their land, two people who had started as strangers bound by necessity and had become partners bound by love. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and beautiful, a testament to their hard work and dedication. But more important than any material success was the family they had created, the love they shared, and the legacy they would pass down to their children and grandchildren. Peter married at 22, bringing a lovely young woman named Catherine to the ranch. She fit in immediately, as hardworking and dedicated as any Quinn, and she gave them their first grandchild, a girl they named Penelope Grace Quinn after her grandmother. When Penelope held her namesake for the first time, she thought about the unbroken line of Grace women who had loved this land, and she felt her father's presence as clearly as if he were standing beside her. Rose returned from Kansas City with advanced training in business and accounting, and she immediately set about modernizing the ranch's financial systems. Within 2 years, their profits had increased by 30%, and Rose's innovations were being copied by other ranches throughout the region. She married a fellow businessman and split her time between Kansas City and the ranch, managing the financial side from whichever location made sense. James brought his first championship horse home at 19, a beautiful Mustang mare he had trained from wild filly to show champion. He built a separate horse training operation on a corner of the ranch property, and his reputation brought in enough business to make it a profitable enterprise in its own right. When he married at 23, his wife was a fellow horse trainer, and together they created a breeding program that became known throughout the western states. On their 30th anniversary, William and Penelope officially retired from ranch management, though both still spent time working with the cattle and horses they loved. The ranch was in Peter's capable hands now, with support from his siblings, and it continued to thrive under the next generation's leadership. William and Penelope moved into a smaller house they built on a hill overlooking the property, a place where they could watch their grandchildren play and their children work, secure in the knowledge that the legacy would continue. They spent their days in comfortable routine, morning coffee watching the sunrise, afternoons working in the garden or riding out to check on favorite spots, evenings on the porch holding hands and remembering. You ever wish you had bought your own land instead of gambling everything on me? Penelope asked one evening when they were both in their late 50s, their hair gray and their faces lined but their love as strong as ever. Never, William answered immediately. This land is as much mine as if I had bought it myself, because I earned it through years of partnership with the woman I love. And more than the land, I have you, our children, our grandchildren, and a life so rich I could never have dreamed it during those lonely years on the cattle trails. Penelope squeezed his hand, feeling the familiar calluses and scars, the texture of a life lived through hard work and dedication. I am so glad you rode onto my property that night. I am so glad you were brave enough to offer me everything and trust that I would not waste it. I am glad you were brave enough to accept." William lifted her hand to his lips, a gesture he had repeated thousands of times over their decades together. "We have lived a good life, Penelope Quinn, a very good life indeed." As they watched the sun set over the Missouri hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold, Penelope reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with desperation and ended with joy, beginning with strangers and ending with soulmates. The ranch that had almost been lost to foreclosure now spread out before them, 4 generations of family working together to maintain and grow the legacy. Their story had become local legend in Clifton Hill. The banker who tried to steal a woman's land, the cowboy who rode in before sunrise with a saddlebag full of cash, the hasty dawn wedding that became one of the great love stories of western Missouri. Young couples planning their own weddings would ask Penelope and William for advice, and they always said the same thing: trust builds love, and love builds everything else. On their 40th anniversary, the family gathered from across Missouri and beyond to celebrate. Peter and Catherine had given them 5 grandchildren. Rose and her husband had 2. James and his wife had 3. The house was full of noise and laughter and children running everywhere, and Penelope felt her heart might burst from happiness. That evening, after the party had wound down and the grandchildren had been put to bed, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset together. William stood with effort, his joints not what they used to be, and cleared his throat. "I want to tell you all something important," he said, his voice still strong despite his age. 40 years ago today, I rode onto this property with $800 and a desperate plan. I married your mother in a ceremony that lasted less than 10 minutes, and I had no idea if we would ever be anything more than business partners. But she took a chance on me, and I took a chance on her, and together we built all of this." He gestured to the land, the house, the family gathered around them. "The lesson I want you all to take from our story is this: love is not just a feeling. Love is a choice you make every single day. It is choosing to work together when things are hard. It is choosing to trust when you have every reason to doubt. It is choosing partnership over pride and family over individual ambition. Your mother and I chose each other 40 years ago, and we have chosen each other every day since. That is why we are still standing here, still holding hands, still in love after 4 decades." Penelope stood beside her husband, tears streaming down her face. "What your father is too modest to say is that he saved me and this ranch through sheer force of will and generosity of spirit. He could have bought his own land, started his own legacy, but instead he chose to preserve mine. He gave me everything I needed and never asked for anything in return except the chance to be my partner. That kind of selflessness is rare, and I have spent 40 years trying to be worthy of it." "You have always been worthy," William said softly, pulling her close. "From the first moment I saw you on that porch, refusing to give up even when everything was lost, I knew you were worthy of everything I had to give." Their children and grandchildren gathered around them, 3 generations of love and legacy. And Penelope felt the presence of her father and mother, her grandfather who had first claimed this land, and all the Grace family members who had worked and died to build something lasting. They were all here in spirit, celebrating what their sacrifice had created. As the years continued to pass, William and Penelope slowed down, as all people must. They spent more time in their chairs on the porch, less time riding out to check fences. But their love never dimmed, and their presence remained the heart of the family. On their 50th anniversary, when both were in their 70s, the whole family gathered again for a massive celebration. Grandchildren had become adults, and now great-grandchildren ran through the yard. The ranch had expanded to include over 3,000 acres, one of the largest operations in the region. The Grace Quinn name was known and respected throughout Missouri. During the party, their youngest great-granddaughter, a tiny thing of 4 years old, climbed into Penelope's lap. "Great-grandma, tell me about when great-grandpa saved the ranch." Penelope looked at William, and they shared a smile full of 50 years of shared history. "Well, little one, it happened a very long time ago, before even your grandfather was born. There was a brave woman who was about to lose everything she loved, and there was a cowboy who rode through the night to help her." "Did he fight bad men?" the little girl asked, eyes wide. "He fought something harder than bad men. He fought despair and hopelessness. He brought money to save the ranch, but more importantly, he brought love and partnership." Penelope stroked the child's hair, so like her own had been once, dark and thick and full of life. "He married the brave woman at sunrise, and they built a life together that became our whole family." "Were you the brave woman, great-grandma?" "I was indeed. And your great-grandfather was the cowboy." Penelope looked at William, her eyes shining with love that had only deepened over the decades. "He rode in just before sunrise when things seemed darkest, and he brought the dawn with him." William took her free hand and held it gently. "We brought the dawn together, my love, always together." They sat surrounded by family, watching another sunset over the land that had brought them together. In their 70s now, they had lived to see their wildest dreams exceeded. The ranch prospered. Their children were happy and successful. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would carry the legacy forward into the next century. But more than any material success, they had each other. Through droughts and floods, through boom times and lean years, through births and deaths and all the challenges life had thrown at them, they had stood together. The hasty marriage born of desperation had become one of the great love stories, proof that sometimes the best things in life come from taking chances when everything seems lost. As the sun set on their 50th anniversary, painting the Missouri sky in brilliant colors, Penelope leaned against William's shoulder and thought about that terrified young woman standing on her porch at dawn, watching for the banker who would take everything. She wanted to tell that woman not to be afraid, that a cowboy was riding through the darkness toward her, that he carried not just money but love and partnership and a future beyond her wildest dreams. "What are you thinking?" William asked, as he had asked thousands of times over their 50 years together. "I am thinking that I would do it all again," Penelope said. "Every hard year, every challenge, every moment of fear and uncertainty, I would do it all again for the chance to build this life with you." "As would I," William agreed. "Though next time I might try to court you properly before proposing marriage." Penelope laughed, the sound still as bright and genuine as it had been when she was 24. "I like the way we did it just fine. We learned to love each other as we built our life together. That seems more honest somehow, more real." "It was very real," William confirmed. "The realest thing I have ever done." As darkness fell and the stars came out over the Missouri hills, the family moved inside for cake and more celebration. But Penelope and William stayed on the porch a moment longer, holding hands and watching the stars emerge one by one. "Thank you for riding in before sunrise," Penelope whispered. "Thank you for being brave enough to say yes," William whispered back. They went inside together as they had done everything for 50 years, partners and lovers and best friends. Their story had started with desperation and ended with joy, and every day in between had been a choice to build love through trust and partnership. The Grace Quinn Ranch would stand for generations, a testament to what could be built when two people chose each other against all odds. And though William and Penelope would eventually pass from this world, as all people must, their love story would live on, told and retold to children and grandchildren. A reminder that sometimes the greatest loves begin in the darkest hours, and that courage and trust can build foundations that last forever. The banker had come at dawn to foreclose on her land, but the cowboy had ridden in with cash before sunrise came, and in doing so, he had saved not just a ranch, but created a legacy of love that would echo through the generations. Proof that the best things in life are worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, and worth building together one day at a time.